My name's Earl McKenna, and I've been pulling things out of the ocean for 50 years. Some of them were fish. Some of them were memories I wish I'd left down there in the dark. But that morning, the morning I'm about to tell you about, I pulled up something that changed the water. October 1987. I remember my daughter had just turned 22, had missed her birthday again. The sea doesn't care much for birthdays. I woke up at 3 in the morning, the way old men do, without needing a clock or a reason. The house was dark, except for the kitchen light I always leave on, a habit from years of pre-dawn starts. But something was different that night. I felt it in my chest, that tightness you get when the air itself is holding its breath. I walked to my back porch in Rockport, Massachusetts, where I've lived since before you were born, probably. The fog was already rolling in from the Atlantic, thicker than I'd ever seen it. Not the normal October mist, mind you. This was something else. It moved against the wind, if you can believe that. It moved with purpose, the kind of fog that makes you feel small, like the world's forgotten you exist. My friend Tommy, old Tommy Ricci, God rest him, he'd warned me the night before, said he'd heard things from the fishermen down at the wharf, strange lights in the water, boats coming back early with empty nets, empty eyes. "Don't go out tomorrow, Earl," he'd said, gripping my arm harder than an old man should. Something's not right. But I was 72 years old then, and I'd heard warnings before. The sea is always warning you about something. Most of the time it's just the sea itself. I took my boat out anyway. The Catherine, named after my late one. She was a 32-footer. Nothing fancy, but she knew those waters like they were home, because they were. More home than my house being on it. The fog swallowed me whole the moment I pushed away from the dock. I couldn't see my hands in front of my face. I navigated by memory, the sound of the buoys, by the way the engine felt beneath my boots. The compass told me I was going the right direction, but compasses lie in the fog thick enough. I cut the engine about 2 miles where I usually set. The water was calm, too calm, black as oil, with a sheen that caught no light. I remember thinking, this isn't water. This is something pretending to be water. That's when I saw a light, maybe 50 yards off the starboard side. Not like a boat's light, not like anything I'd ever seen. It was greenish almost, with a phosphorescent quality, the kind of glow you see when you break open certain deep-sea creatures and watch them pulse in your hand. Eerie, ancient, like the light from something that lived before light was invented. It flickered once, twice, then disappeared. I should have started the engine. I should have headed back to shore, found Tommy, and bought him a drink for being right. I didn't. 53 years of fishing teaches you to follow the signs, even when you know, especially then. I prepared my nets. Old habit, automatic as breathing. My hands moved through the motions while my mind was somewhere else, somewhere down in those black waters where that light had been. I threw the net out in a wide arc, the way I'd done 10,000 times before, but this time something caught, not gradually, not the way a school of fish gradually fills your net. No, it was sudden. The net jerked tight, as if I'd cast it over an anchor. I felt the weight of it immediately, something massive, something that shouldn't have been there. I pulled. The net was heavy in a way I'd never felt before, like it weighed 1,000 pounds and growing. Whatever was on the other end of that line wasn't struggling, it was descending, pulling the net down into the deeper water with a kind of patient strength. And that's when I heard it, a sound from beneath the fog, a clicking almost, or maybe it was more like singing. No, not singing. Something older than singing. Something that predated human voices, a vibration in the water itself that traveled up through the net and into my bones. The fog pressed closer, if that's even possible. It was as if the world had shrunk down to just me, my boat, and whatever was beneath the surface, waiting. The lighthouse beam from the shore couldn't penetrate it. I was alone in a pocket of nothing, and something's pulling my net deeper. I gripped the line tighter, my weathered hands burning with the friction. The muscles in my shoulders screamed, but I held on because that's what fishermen do. We hold on. Come on, I whispered to the water. Show yourself. Whatever you are, show yourself. The line went slack. For a moment, nothing happened. The fog hung there, heavy and patient. Then slowly, something began to rise toward the surface. The thing broke the surface like a nightmare, finally remembering how to breathe. I won't lie to you. I've seen things in my life that most men haven't. I've watched storms tear the sky apart. I've pulled up creatures so strange that I kept them hidden in my freezer for weeks, afraid people would think I'd lost my mind. Nothing prepared me for what rose up through that black water with my net wrapped around it like a shroud. It was a shrimp, a camarao, if you want to use the proper word, but Christ Almighty, it was vast, not 3 feet long, not 5. This thing stretched out to nearly 8 feet from the tip of its long antennae to the curve of its tail. Its shell was the color of old brass, encrusted with things that had no name, barnacles that glowed faintly in the darkness, growths that looked almost like coral. It had spent a very long time in the deep places. The moment it broke the surface, the air changed. That's the only way I can describe. The fog suddenly had a smell ancient and thick, like the bottom of the ocean had exhaled across the entire morning, like decay and salt and something else, something that made my teeth ache. The creature thrashed. When a normal shrimp thrashes, it's almost comical, a tiny thing flipping and snapping in the air, desperate to get back to water. This was different. This was violent. The tail whipped against the side of my boat hard enough to crack wood, and I heard the planks groan in protest. One of its legs, each one as thick as my forearm, lashed out and caught the net line, snapping it like it was made of thread. The weight of it dragged my boat toward the water. I lunged for my knife, the same blade I've been carrying since 1962, with a handle worn smooth by 50 years of my grip, and I started sawing at the net. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst right through my ribs. The creature's antennae whipped through the air, and one of them caught me across the face. Blood, to taste blood and salt water mixed together. Get back, I was shouting, though at what, I don't know. At the thing itself? At God? At my own cowardice for trying to escape it? The net finally gave way. The shrimp, and I still can't quite believe I'm saying this even now, all these years later, the shrimp turned in the water with an almost graceful movement and looked at me. I know what you're thinking. It's a station. It doesn't have eyes that can express anything. But I'm telling you, in that moment, in that fog-choked morning off the coast of Rockport, that creature looked at me, really looked, the way you look at someone when you're trying to understand them, trying to know them. Its eyes were enormous and black, like windows opening onto depths I couldn't fathom. In those eyes, I saw something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up like I'd been struck by lightning. Recognition. It knew me. I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how a creature that size could survive in our waters, how it could grow to such proportions, or why it would surface at all. But I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. That thing had been waiting for me. It had been down there in the dark, pulling my net down, singing that impulse song, and it had been waiting. The creature began to sink back into the slowly, deliberately, it descended. Its antennae trailed upward like long copper fingers reaching for the surface one last time, and as it went down, I heard the sound again, that vibration, that ancient clicking that felt less like a noise and more like a message. I understood then, and I've never told anyone this until now because I knew they'd think I was mad, that it was saying goodbye. The fog rolled over the place where it had been, and it was gone. I stood there in the bow of my boat, bleeding from where its antenna had cut me, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the rail, my net destroyed, my boat had taken damage. The sun was just beginning to break through the fog on the eastern horizon, turning everything gray and gold and utterly ordinary again. I started the engine. My hands moved through the motion, throttle, check the compass, adjust the rudder, but my mind was somewhere else. I kept seeing those eyes, that moment of impossible recognition. As I turned the boat back toward shore, I saw something floating where the creature had been. At first I thought it was debris, a piece of net, maybe, or trash. But as I got closer, my stomach dropped. It was a ring, a simple gold band, the kind that might fit on a woman's finger. I don't know why I fished it out of the water. I don't know why I kept, but I did. I held it in my palm, still dripping with seawater, and I knew, with the kind of certainty that comes from somewhere deeper than reason, that this was important, that this meant something. It took me 40 minutes to get back to the dock. The fog had lifted completely by then, burned away by the rising sun like it had never been there at all. But I could still smell it in my clothes, hair, that deep ocean smell, that ancient, impossible smell. Tommy was there waiting for me. He took one look at my face, at the blood on my shirt, at the damaged boat, and his expression went white. "What happened?" he asked. I looked down at the gold ring in my palm. It was warm, impossibly warm, as if something living had only just released it. "I caught something," I said. "What?" Tommy stepped closer, his old eyes sharp and worried. I opened my mouth to tell him about the shrimp size, about those terrible, intelligent eyes, but the words wouldn't come. Because as I looked at the ring, really looked at it, I saw something inside the band, an inscription, worn nearly smooth by time and water. It read, E+C forever, E+C, Earl and Catherine, my wife's ring. The ring I'd held when she died 20 years before. Stroke took her in the night, was out on the water. The ring I'd thrown into the ocean from the rail of the asking the sea to keep it safe. Asking the sea to keep her safe, in whatever way the sea understands such things. I never told Tommy what I'd caught. I never told anyone. Some things aren't meant to be explained. Some mysteries are supposed to stay mysteries, or they lose their power. I kept that ring. I kept it in my pocket for the rest of my life, and I never went back out to that particular stretch of water again. The sea had given me back what I'd lost, and I understood, finally, that it had been waiting all those years to do it. 38 years have passed since that morning. I'm 90, and the doctors tell me my heart isn't what it used to be. I suppose that's fitting. After what happened on the water, I'm not sure my heart was ever meant to be the same. People ask me sometimes, the few who know the full story, whether I regret it. Whether I wish I'd stayed in bed that morning, ignored that pull in my chest, let Tommy's warning keep me safe on dry land. The answer is no, but not for the reasons you might think. I didn't regret it because I got Catherine's ring back. That's what people want to believe, that this is a romantic tale about a man and the sea reuniting him with his lost, and maybe it is. But the real truth is more complicated than that. The real truth is darker, stranger, and it's taken me 38 years to understand it. I never caught another shrimp that size. I've fished those waters thousands of times since, and I've never felt that pull again, never seen that phosphorescent glow in the deep. It's almost as if that creature existed only for that one moment, only to bring me that ring, only to show me those impossible and make me understand something about the ocean that I'd been resisting my whole life. The sea is alive. Not alive in the way we understand life, not alive the way you and I are alive, but alive with intention, alive with memory, alive with a kind of consciousness that moves through the water like electricity through copper wire. After Catherine died, I spent 10 years angry at the ocean. I'd given my whole life to it, and it had taken her from me while I was out chasing fish, profit margin. I blamed the sea for her stroke. I blamed it for my absence. I blamed it for everything I'd lost while I was focused on what I could catch and carry back to shore. But that morning in the fog, The sea showed me something I needed. It wasn't indifferent to my pain. It had been listening. All those years, it had been listening to my grief, my rage, my desperate prayer as I threw her ring into the water. And when the time was right, when I was finally old enough, broken enough to understand, it answered, not an explanation, not with comfort exactly, but with a gift, with the return of what I'd surrendered. I kept the ring in a small glass jar on my nightstand for the rest of my life. I never wore it. I never showed it to anyone except Tommy in the end when he was, and I needed to tell the truth. He held it in his weathered hand and wept. Tommy understood. He'd spent 50 years on the water too. But here's what I've never told anyone, not even Tommy. Sometimes on quiet nights, the fog rolled in thick from the Atlantic, I would take that ring out and hold it to my ear. And I swear that I could hear something, a vibration, a sound like distant singing, a sound like the ocean remembering my name. The fear that haunted me for years after that morning wasn't fear of the creature itself. It was fear that I'd imagined the whole thing. Fear that at 72 years old, my mind had finally cracked under the weight of all those decades at sea. Fear that I'd dreamed Catherine's ring into existence just because I needed to believe the ocean still cared. But then Tommy died, and his daughter came to clear out his. She found a journal, Tommy's private, kept for 60 years. In it, he'd written about that morning. He'd written about watching me come back to shore, about the blood on my face, about the way I'd looked, showed him the ring. And he'd written something else, something that made me understand I wasn't crazy. He'd written, I believe him, because the night before, I heard it too. That singing, that clicking in the water, it came from everywhere at once. And for just a moment, I understood what it was saying. It said, I remember everything. Tommy had heard it. Tommy, who'd warned me not to go out, who'd been a fisherman for longer than I'd been alive, had heard the ocean speaking. So what was it really? Was it a giant shrimp? Some undiscovered species that defies every law of nature I know? Was it Catherine, somehow transformed into something ancient, strange, reaching back across death to remind me she was still there? Was it the ocean itself, given form and hunger and intention, walking through the water on legs like copper wire? I don't know. I've had 38 years to think about it. I still don't know. What I do know is this. The sea is not what we think it is. It's not just salt and fish and currents that follow predictable patterns. It's something older and stranger and far more merciful than we give it credit for. It keeps score. It remembers. And sometimes, just sometimes, if you've given it enough of your life, if you've respected it enough and suffered enough and loved deeply enough, it gives something back. My hands aren't steady anymore. I can barely hold a fishing rod without my fingers shaking. The doctor says I should never go out on the water again, and I listen to him now. The Catherine sits in dry dock, waiting for the sea to reclaim her eventually, the way it reclaims everything. But I still wake up before dawn sometimes. I still smell the salt air from my window, and I still, after all these years, feel that old pull. That sense that there's something waiting for me out there in the deep water, something patient and knowing, kind. I keep Catherine's ring in that glass jar. It's my most precious possession, not because it's gold, not because it has her name in it, but because it's proof. Proof that I didn't imagine it. Proof that the ocean heard me. Proof that love doesn't end when the body stops breathing. It just changes form and goes deeper, becomes part of the great, dark mystery beneath the wave. The younger fishermen in town, they think I'm a superstitious old fool. They laugh when I tell them the story. But the old ones, the ones who've spent decades with their hands in the water, who felt the pull of the tide in their bones, they understand. They nod slowly and say nothing, because they've felt it too, that present beneath the surface, that intelligent, that listening. I don't fish a stretch of water anymore. I've never been back to the place where fog thickest a creature rose. Some gifts, once received, shouldn't be pursued again. Some mysteries are meant to stand alone, singular and perfect, a moment spent in amber. But I think about it every day. I think about those black, intelligent eyes. I think about the gentleness in that creature's descent back into the depths. I think about my wife, lost for 20 years, somehow finding a way to reach me through the medium of the ocean itself, that vast, ancient, incomprehensible thing that had been my rival and my lover and my home for 53 years of fishing. The sea doesn't like promise. It doesn't honor contracts or agreements, but it remembers and it takes care of its own. That's what I've learned. That's the only real truth I have to offer you after a lifetime of pulling things from the water and trying to make sense of them. The ocean is alive. It grieves. It loves. And if you're patient enough, if you suffer long enough, if you're willing to throw what you treasure most into its depths and let it go, sometimes, if you're very lucky, it throws it back. The sea teaches us that grief doesn't disappear. It transforms. When we release what we love most into the unknown, we don't lose it. We simply allow it to exist in a form we may not immediately recognize. The ocean in this story represents life itself, vast, incomprehensible, and far more merciful than we dare to believe. Earl learned that love transcends death, memory persists across decades, and the universe, its own mysterious, listens to our pain. Sometimes the greatest gifts arrive not as we expect them, but exactly when we need them most. The real treasure was never the ring. It was the proof that nothing we cherish is ever truly lost. If this story stirred something in your heart, if you found yourself lost in the fog with Earl McKenna, then I ask you, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Share it with someone who loves the sea, who understands loss, who believes that mystery is more beautiful than certainty. There are more stories waiting, stories of storm and monsters, of men and the ocean, of moments that blur the line between reality and legend. Don't miss them. Join us on this journey through the dark waters. Thank you for listening.